Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to We Built an Empire. I'm your host, Kyle Wolff. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I'm here with Carrie Harrison and Carmen Ilisoi with Oak Tree Youth Resources. I've kind of done a little bit of research on this one, and I'm really excited to have you guys on. I sort of stopped mid-research because I was like, I want to hear them talk about that specifically versus, reading this article. But, I actually just met you in person this morning, Carrie. And it's been my pleasure, and I'm really excited. So, I just want to kind of jump into it. I know we're limited a little bit on time. So if you can, give us the brief background on Oak Tree.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
My husband and I were foster parents by default with some young people that we knew needed a place to be. And after adopting 5 youth over time, we saw a need for young people aging out of foster care. Human Services was greatly supportive to those young people if they wanted it, but we found that young people just really needed more support and someone to come alongside. And so COVID 2020, we thought, hey, we should start a nonprofit. So did so with our own money and rented a place and got a host parent, and straight out of the blocks, we had juvenile justice system in Grand Mesa contacting us. They were trying to get some people out of incarceration that were minors. And so our first youth was 16. And to date, she's our most successful young person. And I'd love to tell her story. But we just, we saw the need, and I think I had a little bit too much free time and just ran with it. And Human Services supported us by bringing in young people that maybe needed some support as they were aging out. It was just a crazy time during COVID. And so during that first year, we wound up with 2 different rentals, both of them having a house parent living at them, and we're able to take under 18 if necessary. But the ultimate goal was to prevent young people from couch surfing or being in unsafe places, and get them started with maybe some life skills. How could we support? And just a little bit of winging it with getting to know young people. I mean, it's got to be strange for these young people that maybe already have some trauma to then show up on a doorstep with their luggage, and this is where they have to be. And the goal was to figure out how we could alleviate some stress and trauma and provide a place where we could build relationship as well as develop life skills. Nice.
And so what age bracket are we talking about with these people?
So we are an agency and partner with the Colorado Rural Collaborative on runaway and homeless youth, and they've developed a program working with the state and HUD as far as parameters on aging, and federal dynamics are already set up with the basic center program, which is under 18. And then over 18 is considered youth, 18 to 24, right there before turning 25. And so 2 different groups of young people that can be worked with. So the basic center program offers support with young people maybe that have run away or needing to get out of their home because of various different reasons, not necessarily going straight to child welfare. And so we can offer them a place to be. Well, at that time, we were offering a place to be where they had a safe space. We had 72 hours to contact Human Services, contact a parent, start that process on reunification if necessary, or child welfare being involved. So I don't know. Do you want me to go into the over 18?
So you have 72 hours between the time that these people, let's say that they come to the office to find them a home? Or to find
No, to get them stabilized
okay
to the best of our ability, but to involve child welfare if necessary, or contact with parent. Sometimes it's something where, a parent and a young person are not getting along. Someone says, get out, or a young person decides to run away. And sometimes it's just diffusing. If child welfare is involved, they have their process that they go through, and obviously can put someone in an emergency placement if necessary. So it's just that us reporting and saying, we have a young person that has reached out to us. Sometimes the police contact us. Sometimes they call our number. And just making sure, because of their age, that they are in a safe space and we can help them within the parameters of the law.
That's interesting. So, so many questions running through my head. Sorry. The article that I read in the Herald, which came out a couple of days ago, I think, was saying that you have placed 58 youth into some type of a housing scenario. Is that is that separate than like foster care, or are you placing a lot of these youth with, is it a foster care? Is it different? Can you expand on that?
Sure. And based on the conversation today with Fort Lewis person, tonight will be 59 young people. So what that was referring to is a young person reaches out, whether that's under 18 or over 18, and they need a place to be for whatever reason. Emergency situation, maybe they've been asked to leave, all the different scenarios. And getting them into a bed, which could be, if they're, over 18, a motel room. It could be, when we initially started, we had housing with a house parent. So it could be placing them in an emergency bed. We had 3-bedroom houses or condos, making sure that they have a place to be. Of that number that was quoted, that could be a young person staying one night, and up to the longest was 1.5 years. And otherwise, if those young people weren't placed in beds, they're couch surfing, they might be sleeping in a car, they might be sleeping in an unsafe environment. So the goal is to stop that reactive part of being a young person and just, I got this, I can take care of it. I'll call so-and-so. I can sleep in my car. I can sleep wherever. In the summer, I've got a tent. And it's offering that safe space that they can be in. And again, even when they're to 18, it's determining, how can we help you, get you to a place? Do you know someone? Can you go back home? Whatever that can look like. Yeah. So it's a lot of dialogue. It's quick relationship building that we attempt to do, because we're strangers to these young people.
Sure.
But being established as a nonprofit, and I feel like the location that we're in, they know they can come to us and just say, hey, I need help.
What's the response been like from these youth individuals? I mean, because, I'm just trying to put myself into that perspective. And I think we've all been there, in our, 13, 14, 15, 18, we think we're 45 and we've got the world pretty much worked out, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, are they apprehensive towards like kind of searching for this help that you guys are providing, or are they open to listening to you and kind of working with the system, so to speak, that you guys are providing?
Oh gosh, it's a little bit of everything, but I feel like, in the beginning, having a house we seem legit. Mm-hmm. We had a place to put young people, but I think there was probably more apprehension then than there is now, where we have a drop-in space, because I could meet a young person at a coffee shop or at the park or whatever, go to them. But I'm just some lady they don't know rolling up and with a business card that was printed. They have no idea. Yeah. So sometimes they were guarded, but it's interesting because the majority of the time they're not. Young people will tell you what they want you to know, but a lot of these young people we work with have had trauma in their life, and they know how to play the game a little bit and just say, this is what I need you to know, or I'll say what I need you to know to get me what I need.
Sure.
Do you want to expound on that?
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of it comes down to too, like when you have, these youth or young adults that have hit like rock bottom, so to speak. I think it, like speaking from experience, it can be a lot easier to just be like, man, I don't know what to do anymore. Like I just need to go get some help. And kind of like speaking to what Carrie said too is, I remember being a youth and being in a similar situation and knowing exactly what I needed to say in order to kind of get what I needed in the moment. And I think it just kind of speaks to the resiliency of like these youth and young adults. But yeah, I feel like, it's a little bit of both. In terms of like their reactions and things like that.
Right. And the reality of all of that is these young people, whether trusting or not, they are putting themselves in a risky situation just to see if they could get help.
You mean they're by going
to a stranger,
your office, to a stranger,
Yeah.
that is a risk to them in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
And, with brain development of teenagers, and obviously when you factor trauma into that, there's a lot of reaction. I just need what I need. And the survival skills kick in, for sure. So alleviating that by being in an office now, and we can talk about that in a minute, but we're in a place that gives us a drop-in space. And so it legitimizes what we're doing.
Sure.
And it helps that trust and that relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you that.
Right.
Something that you can touch and grab, right?
Right.
It's brick and mortar for literal terms.
Yeah.
And so it gives legitimacy behind
Yeah.
you guys.
I think it's also just like a drop-in space is just that, a drop-in space, right? Like you don't have to be there for 2 hours to get something, You can like pop in for like a minute. You don't really have to say much. You're just like, man, I need like a toothbrush, like my teeth feel grimy. Here you go. It can be as simple as that. And I think that for youth that are maybe homeless or just in like a hard situation, that simplicity is really nice of like, yay, I don't have to like re-explain my story again to get something that I need. I can just receive it, and I think that's pretty special.
So real quick though, I'm having trouble and I want to ask this because my wife and I, we have actually been talking to not adoption agencies, but fostering agencies. And we met with the county the other day, and, I think that it's a great thing to want to foster and potentially adopt kids, especially if they're in an unfortunate situation. But I still have so many questions about that process, and we're going to be meeting with some other families that can kind of explain, the ins and outs of things that are untold and unforeseen, and the good and the bad. Like I'm just that down to brass tacks kind of person. I want to hear it all.
Right.
And so, but obviously to be a foster parent, you do have to go through certain background checks and things like, so I'm hearing, you guys talk about what you're offering to this youth, but from the perspective of someone having a home or offering a bed to these individuals, is it still fostering, or is it different because it's a different type of program, like legally speaking or something? Can you expand on that?
Sure. And if you want to talk foster care, let's talk.
Sounds like
I can speak highly of La Plata County and how they handle things. So initially, we were considered a host home when we had host parents, which is people that I had living in the home. And they were responsible. I was in and out constantly. And if they couldn't be there at night, I stayed the night there. I was still a licensed foster parent at that time. We were not a licensed host home, which is another process that we'll get to at some point in the next few years. But background checks, reference checks, and such, of course. But that is the difference between that under 18 and over 18. That under 18 obviously has to be in a place where there is someone that's been checked out. It's not foster care. It is definitely limited. Thus the 72 hours. It gives a young person a place to be. We've done our due diligence, but we cannot operate as a foster home. We do not have host parents right now. We've gone a different route with the real estate market and things changing. We've definitely had to go a different route. But that over 18, we had an apartment where we could sleep up to 6, and I put males there, and it was a place where a young person could stay longer and get established, save some money, get a job, school, whatever they need to do in order to move forward in getting their own place. And we helped them with that. So that under 18 is the specific you're asking about with the legalities. There is a bill that passed, 106, that actually allows a youth 16 and 17 to request shelter. And that does not necessarily have to be involving child welfare. Okay. A lot of times that they do ask, they do need to move into child welfare and foster care. But a young person can say, I want to be placed over here, whether that be a friend's house, and they have the voice to say where they want to go, where that was not allowed previously.
Like they have the voice within like your organization or?
Statewide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry, and I'm so naive to most of this, right? The ins and outs of it. It's a completely different world, but so
we can walk you through the steps that we take.
So, let's say that a child gets in an argument with their parents. They have legal right to tell their parent or somebody, another adult, that they want to go over here to seek shelter. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Okay.
But again, it's that 72 hours.
Okay.
Before the process has to be working towards some sort of solution.
Got you. Either resolving it with the parents and calming the teenager down or okay.
And sometimes that is, again, a young person saying, I want to stay at my brother and his wife's place, and parents can agree and such. And we don't get into that aspect of, that's the parent's responsibility, but we can facilitate and make sure that a young person is able to speak their voice and be there to support. We can't step in the sense of making decisions. We can just say, let's see if we can calm this down. And sometimes a parent say, no, get him home, call the police. We had a situation at a school where a young person did not want to go home and was saying they weren't safe and was at the school. This was about 6:00 at night when I got called, and they were asking if we could house this young person. They were close to turning 17. And by the time I got there, the parents were there. School had everybody separated, and the police were saying, you have to go home. And I explained to the police department the 106 bill that has recently passed, and that didn't go over well. And that was in a different county. But the reality is a young person can say, I just need to be somewhere else. And they actually have the legal right to go somewhere else, and the parents not be held responsible. But again, we have that 72 hours if something needs to move forward in order to try to help.
Sure. That's interesting. That's in my head. I'm trying to put myself in that perspective of, I have a 10-year-old, I have a 10 and a 7-year-old. So I'm like thinking
as a parent,
if my 16-year-old told me, it's like, what would you do? And I mean,
And the goal is obviously a young person being safe in their home, but also empowering young people to be able to say what they need.
Sure.
And that's that age group of, if 16, I'm older than both of you, but 16 is a lot different than 16 when I was younger, as far as young people, a lot of young people's ability to stand up for what they need, and mental health related especially.
Right.
Yeah, that just seems, I mean, we were talking about it, kind of before show is that age bracket though can be very, I mean, just for a person coming through, I shouldn't say like if at their home life is bad, right? Or something, there's an outlier that's causing them to where they're feeling unsafe and they want to go. But as a 16-year-old, I know it's different from when we're growing up to where it is now. I mean, I still think in their heads they're dealing with so many different emotions.
Very much so.
That it's almost like, I could see that not necessarily being problematic. That shouldn't be the same word, but almost like taken advantage of.
I'm sure. Yeah.
That situation of
Sure.
calling upon that act that passed, or I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Like I'm not too many years removed from my kid now.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Jen, if you hear this, please don't do that.
Well, let's give an example of a teenager who, has a spat with parent. Okay, you have that situation, but sometimes you have a young person who lives in a home where there's substance abuse,
Sure.
or there's been domestic violence, or we've worked with victims of trafficking, where parents have trafficked their children.
Oh wow.
Those are harsh realities. It's not just a teenager. It's actually rarely a teenager.
Right.
Taking
Mad
advantage
and-
of it, or mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say
mean-
maybe one. We haven't really seen that.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's pros and cons to things like this, but at the end of the day, if you can make one youth feel more comfortable, like getting out of like a really gnarly, chaotic home life, like heck yeah, like I'm all for it. Yeah, kind of like what Carrie said, since I've been here, I don't think I've ever heard of a youth just being like, yeah, I just don't really like my parents. I just want to like leave.
Sure.
kinda
I mean, I guess I should reel it back for a second. I wasn't really, my head was just kind of running with it of like, well, that
Right.
seems wild, just because, the volatility of a youth's mind. Sometimes it's just, they're dealing with hormones or dealing
Of course.
with,
Right.
dating. Oh my gosh, this person didn't like me.
Right.
All
Yeah.
kinds of things that we have to deal with as youth. But
Yeah.
absolutely, if somebody is in a bad scenario, whether it be, drug abuse or, anything like that, then that youth deserves a chance, and if that's for 72 hours or if that's permanent placement, I mean, I think that they deserve that chance, right? They shouldn't have to be subject to that scenario of living. And so,
Right.
so walk me through though, your process. We've got, let's say that, friends, let's just go to the story and we don't have to do details, but the gentleman or the person at the school the other day, so they want to be moved. You get called, you show up, you talk to the cops. What happens from there? Walk me through.
Right. So the lead on that was the school counselor and the school and the district therapist, and they knew this young person, and this young person was struggling with mental health issues at that moment, and maybe wasn't in a place to make the best decisions, but had asked for help at the school. And so that school solution, based on what the young person was saying, was an evaluation at Access Acute Unit. And let's try to bring the situation down, but get her some mental health help. And I was really just there as backup if I needed to transport, or how could I help? If the young person had permission to go to a friend's, could I take them over there with permission from parent? And so I was definitely a spectator for most of the time, other than the conversation with the police officer. But when it came down to it, and this has happened in other situations, a parent has said, no, I do not want my child to go to get this assistance. And it's 7, 8 o'clock by the time we get to this. And the young person is insisting. They are feeling possibly suicidal, just not in a healthy situation. And the school therapist was very capable of having a conversation with the family and saying, how can we do this together? Because that is the goal. We're all working together and trying to bring safety to these young people. And so in that situation worked out really well because the family, realized that their child needed support. That was difficult because the young person is saying they need this, and parents initially were saying no. And what happens then is the child said, I want to report this. And so we called Child Protective Services together, and I started the call, and then they handled the call on speakerphone and were able to say, I need this help. And I'm being told no by parent guardian. And nothing really came of that, but it was empowering for that young person to say what they need. And it was beautiful because the parents did realize. And so I just got to be a spectator for the majority of that.
So, but let's just say that it didn't go that route. I mean, let's say that this youth wanted to go to a home or a place that they could stay for the night or 72 hours. Do they get enrolled into your program? What does it look, hypothetically speaking?
Right. Well, in the past, we had a place to house. We do not currently. And so in that situation, it was more, how can we work together with this family and this young person, especially, where could you stay? And so a friend's name came up and that parent was willing. And so that was the route we were going there. But we have an enrollment through the Rural Collaborative and their documentation system. And so we do that intake and get the information needed, personal information as well as emergency intake. And, because we need to be able to contact someone if necessary. Do you want to talk about HMIS?
Yeah, I guess essentially what HMIS is basically a form that we'll hand to these youth. Sometimes we'll hand it to them. Sometimes we'll just ask them the questions on it. And it essentially is a data collection tool as well as it associates the person's name with a number on the state level.
It's the Homeless Management Information System for the state of Colorado.
Right. And so basically kind of what comes out of that information is just showing the need within your community. And ideally, the more forms you have, the higher need you have kind of thing. And there are different questions that are asked. And dependent on the way that the youth answers it shows that one youth is in more need than this other youth, kind of thing.
But it gives us the understanding of where they're coming through. So one of the questions is, in the last 3 years, how many times have you been homeless?
Right.
And homelessness is just unstable housing. So say a young person is living, and maybe with family, living in someone else's home. Someone else is letting them stay there, which is beautiful, but that's an unstable housing to the extreme of, is this youth couch surfing? Are they sleeping in a car?
Yeah.
So it gives us the opportunity to collect that data to know, not only offer it for the state to be able to collect, but we can know better how we can serve a young person.
Gotcha. So that's it. So is that by definition? So you can be unhoused or homeless if you're living with a relative. I mean, on their couch or even in a bedroom. If it's is there a statutory period where if they're there for, let's say, 2 months in that bed, or how is that defined by the state?
It's any. It's called doubling up. So, for example, if one family is living with a relative but not paying rent, it's considered unhoused or homeless or unaccompanied.
There's got to be thousands that go under the radar.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, that's why. I mean, by definition, there's got to be thousands upon thousands of cases.
Yeah, it's it's things we don't think about, right? Trailer parks count if it's a place.
Wait, hold on.
The real estate mind is.
I can't sell trailers, but expand on that though, real quick.
Like
Because, so a trailer park counts as being unhoused.
Yeah, if it's kind of like a grayish area, if it's not a place that they intend to live for a long period of time.
What is a long period of time?
That's
gray area also. So even set that aside. So what it comes down to is when a family or when a youth enrolls in school, they have the opportunity to say if they're unhoused or not.
Yeah, but they don't
And
know.
the definition.
Yeah, I
and
just
that's
found
the
out
thing.
what unhoused means. Right?
And that's
Right.
the thing
Yeah,
is some people
absolutely.
don't consider themselves unhoused.
Right. I think it's this is maybe where it gets gray. I think it's when if the intent is to live there for a long period of time, then it's not considered unhoused. If that's not the intent, but let's say you're living there for 2 years because you kind of had to, then that would be considered unhoused. So I think it comes down to like what the intent is, and I think that's just up to kind of whoever you're communicating with. On
And
like,
I think that the trailer park aspect, I think that was a federal definition. And trailers are
Right.
looked at a little differently now
Right.
in the rural communities than they are.
absolutely.
But there's other examples of staying in a motel.
right, that would be considered unhoused, or like a campground is considered unhoused. Couch surfing,
Car.
camping.
But there are a lot of young people that don't consider themselves unhoused because they have a place to be. They have food, maybe. And so that's the part about collecting this data for the state and for the rural collaboratives specifically, is to be able to say they're living here, even though maybe a young person doesn't understand that definition. It helps us know for our community numbers as well as the state what's going on.
Right.
Gotcha. Is that so that way? I mean, we need this data collected so that you can provide that to the state so that they can then, I'm assuming, appropriate funds to our county.
Correct. So the Rural Collaborative was established in, I don't know, I think it's 2008 or so. And that is the state's effort to provide services for what's called the balance of state. So we have Denver, Colorado Springs, Junction, those cities. This is everyone else, which is we're a rural community.
Sure.
We work specifically with Southwest, with the 5 county regions in Southwest Colorado, but we can work with any young person in Colorado. But the Rural Collaborative mission is to apply for grants that our small organization cannot apply for. But when they're representing the rural communities, the balance of state, they can apply and be able to receive larger grants
Gotcha.
and bring support for smaller people like us that can reach out to the youth in our communities.
Sure. That's really that unhoused definition. Is really
It's going to bother you.
It's just got me. My mind is just blown.
There are a
It's,
lot of
Right, it's-
families that double up in our
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
especially with the market now.
Well, I mean, that was what I was going to say. Is that I mean, you know, the market is so crazy with not only with real estate but with people, the influx of people. Right. You know, it's like the transients that are coming into our community and the places that they don't have to stay. And in my head, I'm going, well, okay, what about like a college house? You know what I mean? Like you've got 4 or 5 different people. Like how does that classify? It just seems. So let me ask you a quick question though. If that person is paying rent, even in a short-term fashion, that's still technically defined as unhoused, or
If they're not on a lease,
yeah.
and
But if they
they're,
have a lease in place,
I mean, they can pay rent because maybe someone's telling them,
you sure
one of the
somebody-
youth is telling them, yeah, you got to chip in. But if they're not on a lease, so and it really comes down to if a young person says, I don't have stable housing, I am in a situation where I need help. That's where we do what we have to do. We don't scrutinize what they're saying and do due diligence to check and say, oh no, you have a place to be. If a young person's saying, I'm not safe, or I just can't stay there, I don't feel healthy there, whatever that looks like, we are able to step in and try to decipher what their needs are. And like today on the way here, I was contacted by Fort Lewis because there's a young person that came back from break early. School doesn't start till Monday. I don't know. They didn't know when they could get in the dorms or what happened, but was a student athlete, and they don't have the funds to pay for a motel. And so they contacted us, and our organization can get them set up in a motel for a couple of nights. And, we have our program agreement, and they're the only one that are supposed to be in there, and we have our boundaries and such. But the reality is he was going to sleep in his car.
Sure.
For 2 nights. Well, we can help with that. And it's, maybe not the same as someone who suffers from housing instability, but if we can keep him off the streets,
yeah, I mean,
that's a safety issue.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. So you said something
the wheels are turning.
They're always spinning. You said something a minute ago that when you first started this, you guys obviously had, you were a host house or a host family, but you said you're kind of steering away from that. Can you expand on that? Like, are you trying to go into a different direction as far as what your facility is offering? Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah. So the first 2 rentals we had both sold, and it was becoming difficult to find something, and especially someone that would rent to our program because, there's lots of questions.
Sure.
And so I decided that myself and our board decided that maybe we need to go the route of helping young people that 18 and older get into their own place. We are small. I was doing all the jobs with the board that was saying, you're doing too much. But the need was so, so great. And I learned about housing vouchers and the opportunity that was there for young people, especially youth that had been in foster care or maybe had some situations in their life where they had housing instability, would have more of an opportunity to get a housing voucher. And so I was educating myself on how could we help young people get their own housing. Found a property manager that was willing to work with us, Triple H Leasing, and they've just been fantastic. And so we currently have 6 apartments where we initially rented it under our program's name, and then the youth was listed on there. And several of them we've been able to get housing vouchers, and so it is their apartment now. And the goal in all of that being they're learning how to pay a little rent. Our program offers rental support for up to 18 months. And then they develop their rental history and can move into budgeting and learning how to get their own place.
You're giving them
and
the
we're
skills
and then during that time we're offering support, everything from if they need help with getting a budget established or finding a job or whatever that looks like. We've helped some register for their FAFSA. A couple of them have started school. We have some 18-year-olds that are seniors in high school. And so there's so much. I mean, if you just think of yourself at 17, 18, 19, there's so much to it. And if you don't have that adult support teaching, and then you factor in a young person being stressed and the trauma that they've experienced, brain doesn't work as well as maybe it could be if they weren't experiencing that trauma. So we wear a lot of hats every day. A young person can need a toothbrush or they could need to fill out a FAFSA. And so we're learning quite a bit. We work with Manna Soup Kitchen. They are fantastic to work with related to not just food and their market that they have available, but with IDs. A lot of young people don't have their IDs. Either they've lost it or they need to get that ID established so they can get a job. So we have several community partners like that we're able to work with.
It seems like it's pretty well received throughout the community, your organization. There's constant like battles between like the city and the county and then, the little pockets, like as far as those organizations go, right. Our elected officials. But I mean, it seems like everybody that I've talked to kind of prefacing, this interview was, hands down, it's just like, it's a great organization. I mean, it's, I'm still kind of trying to understand it fully in my head, but I do think that what you guys are offering to these, these members that are people that will and can be productive members in our society,
Exactly.
our local community, maybe for years to come,
Right.
You're giving them that kind of start that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise been able to get anywhere else,
And the reality of that is, unfortunately, with that stress of maybe if they didn't have that support, there is the tendency to use substances and to numb. And our goal is preventing these young people from becoming our homeless adult population,
Right.
because it very quickly can turn into a lifestyle.
Sure.
Right.
Whether, preferred or not, it's just, you just get used to the way you're living and you figure it out.
Right. I that reminds me of this article I was reading on the solution to ending adult homelessness. And I clicked on it immediately because I was really, really curious.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm
There's
like,
a
give me a
solution,
solution,
yeah.
right? And it was simple, and I hadn't really thought of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it was like, focus on youth homelessness, right? And it sounds really, really simple, but I think it's like a really profound thing. And I think that these adults were youth at one point in their lives. Trauma continues up into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 80s kind of thing. And I think a lot of times we overlook youth and young adults because I think it's like a good and bad thing. We think they're resilient and they can kind of like move past it. Mm-hmm. But I think that sometimes we think, or we can think, that like, oh yeah, this is just kind of like a phase. Or like, yeah, once they get into like their mid-20s, they won't really be like that anymore, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think it's like really key, just like maybe tuning in a bit more to like the youth around you, the young adults around you.
Yeah, the awareness, especially when the weather warms up, if you look around, you'll start noticing this young person seems to be in this area, general area. You'll see young people at the trolley stop. You'll see them at the rec center. Currently a lot of young people go there to stay warm, and they'll be there all day. So the prevention aspect is a huge part.
Yeah, there was, I talked to Matt Salka. He came on the podcast. We talked in great detail about Purple Cliffs and, the mental health issues within our country and obviously our county and everything. But I was reading something the other day that kind of, you go through Instagram and the algorithm, you watch something and all of a sudden it scrolls and it's like, hey, that's my reel. I remember Matt. And then the next thing was this. So I went down the rabbit hole, right? Kind of similar. But it wasn't talking about youth homelessness, but it was talking about the narrow window between, I'll just say it, a youth potentially fucking up their life, for lack of better terms, and then when they're forgotten as an adult homeless person. It's a very, very fine line. And, a lot of communities and counties across the country are trying to figure out their homeless problems. And it's a problem that I don't think anybody has the golden ticket. Like counties have tried this, hospitals have tried this, and it's just like, it all kind of boils back to mental health, a lot of it, right? But it's like, well, how do we resolve that? But the thing of it is like the one interesting, comment that I took away from that article is like, it's a very fine line. It could be 25, 26. If that person is on the streets at a certain age, or maybe they look a certain way, or they're addicted to certain society as a whole, whether a person wants to or not, is kind of subliminally writing them off, which is unfortunate. And so hearing you talk about that, like focusing on the youth homeless potential or the problem that exists or getting ahead of the curve, it really goes into tune with their next comment was that it's a decade or 2 or 3 decades change to resolve homelessness if everybody got on board. So I'm not saying that like, you have to forget about the people that are already homeless, right? And their problems, because they have valid problems that do need to be addressed. But I think
And they're
it's good
human
that-
beings.
Yes, they're human
Right.
beings. And so we have to do something.
Right. Absolutely.
But focusing on the youth is a huge potential to maybe lessen that amount that would be adding to the new homeless population. Because I think that there is a real stigma around it. And whether, I think the article, the gentleman was like, he was saying like he had muddled something under his breath. And he walked away and his wife was like, "What did you say?" And he was like, I didn't even know. And he said something along the lines of like, get a job or do something like, why don't you just produce or something along those lines. And he's like writing this article to help the homeless problem. But even in his own head, he was like, and so he's like, I felt like at that very moment that I was falling into what I'm writing about as being one of the members of society that just forgets about a person. You're homeless, you've got problems, you're not producing into the community, you're a drain on the economy, whatever somebody wants to label it as. And so, but the thing I took away was that he's like, there's a fine line. And I don't know that it's age dependent, but I, kind of hearing you talk about it, I think maybe that is, if a person is in their 30s and they're homeless, and people maybe start to ask questions of like, well, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with this person?
It's a lot more, like Carrie was like mentioning, remember when you were 17, 18 and you kind of were like, oh yeah, shit, like that was hard, It's a lot easier, or I think it can be a lot easier for adults to relate to difficult youth experiences because you're just juggling so much. You don't have to be like homeless or anything to feel that, right? And I think it also kind of like goes with what you were saying, right? Like once you get into your mid-20s, your 30s, right, you have all of these expectations laid out. And I think it can be a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, this person isn't meeting this like societal norm. So they must be like kind of like put into like this box, But when you're kind of like looking at a youth, it's a lot less of that. And people tend to feel a lot more like flexible with it. Like, okay, like they're doing this thing, but like they can kind of like come out of that, if that makes sense.
They've got time on their side.
Right, exactly.
And the mental health aspect, coming back to that, I mean, to me, that's such a foundation for all of this. And trauma, if you're, that word gets thrown around a lot these days. But I mean, the trauma impact to a brain and the ability for a young person to maybe just do daily activity. So get a job. Okay, an 18-year-old can get a job. Well, if they are traumatized due to a situation at home or a memory of something or a teacher screaming at them, which reminds them of something that happened in their past, they'll shut down. So it's not just as simple as, oh, go get a job. We learn to push through things. We learn to persevere. Well, that's also something that children are taught. Fall down and skin your knee. You'll be okay. You good? Get up. Okay, shake it off. Let's go. And not everybody is raised that way. Maybe someone smacked around because they tripped, skinned their knee, and they held up the family to go to some event. I mean, again, lots of scenarios. But for whatever reason, if there is a young person that's experienced trauma and they're not feeling safe and they need a more stable housing situation, maybe we can help.
You think the level of like tolerance has changed since when we were younger to now? Like I'm questioning that because things like are changing so drastically, like in our world. But I mean, I mean that's a good somebody falls down, they might have gotten beaten because they caused an impact or delayed, or however they're raised. But I do remember like being, growing up and doing some stuff and definitely getting not smacked around. Like
Yeah.
my parents never like hit me in the head or the
Appropriately
face.
disciplined.
Yes, that's a good way to classify it. Yes, I was appropriately
And that looks
disciplined.
different now than it did
Sure,
then, maybe.
that's what I was saying. But it just seems like, and maybe, because I've been trying to read as much as I can about like mental health, because I think that all of us on some level do suffer from it, whether we admit it or not.
Sure.
This podcast has been a huge advocate for me. Like as I talk, I get something back. Like I was saying before show, it's a very selfish deal because I think it's kind of like therapy for me to talk long form to people. Right. But I do think that, I do at some level suffer from some not mental health issues, but just I can't always work it out, right? And I do have like little bats of depression, and so this is good for me. But it seems like maybe it's just because now it's common to talk about it and to bring it to light. Mm-hmm. Right. But I feel like mental health is like everywhere anymore. Like mental health issues are everywhere. And do you think that it has grown over the years, like since from when we were, because like, I mean, I can't imagine that there weren't people that had mental health when I was 17 or 18.
Right. But the acceptance of being able to talk about it, the education that's happening around us in the schools. Right. And
the language too, right? You could be feeling something, like 20 years ago, and having like a word to describe what you're feeling, like I'm depressed, is really, really powerful. And I can't speak to like 40 years ago, but I don't think we were equipped to have that language back then.
It was like a negative. Like I can say 10 years ago, there's no way that I would have gotten on a microphone.
Right.
And granted, there may only be 1,000 people that hear this podcast, right? But I never, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said I was depressed.
Right.
God dang it, I'm a man. I'm not going to, but I mean, the reality of it is like, I don't know that society said, I think it was just me like in my head going, it is okay to actually talk about this. It's okay to be like, yeah, I'm not always 100%.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But do you think there's more mental health issues in our society, or do you just think they're being more talked about and they've always been there?
I think they've always been there. And I think that gratefully we're reaching a point where people feel more comfortable bringing them up. I mean, that's like one opinion. I don't really have anything to back it up with.
That's all right.
But
you heard it first, ladies and gentlemen.
Quoter. But I think there's also the pressures of life, and as time goes on and pressures change in society and the cost of living and whatever that looks like, mixed with social media. I hate to say it, but those the constant need to perform, and the expectations that are put on by social media to look a certain way and all of those things that we know about. I think it's just not just one thing. It's multiple things that have happened over the years, but the positivity is that there are words to explain how we're feeling, and is more acceptance and freedom for people to say what they need to say and explain their feelings. But your question was related to, is there more mental health problems? I mean, in my opinion, I believe so. And for numerous reasons, such as what I mentioned, but also it's hard because I just was dealing with a mental health facility today with someone, and the insane amount of steps that have to be taken just to get someone to help.
Yeah.
People give up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this situation, this was our 4th visit, literally just to get a piece of paper signed to help this person in the next month. It was that simple. Of the facts were there. All they had to do was look it up in the computer. But we kept making appointments and going. And it's so hard to get the help. I don't think there's enough available for even just our small community. So I can't imagine trying to get that mental health support in a big community where maybe you don't have transportation. So you've got to take a bus to get to here and get to here. And just the whole effect of trying to get to a therapeutic appointment.
Sure.
People give up.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Matt and I talked to, in grave detail about was the access to it, and they are working. Hopefully they can maybe do a small remodel to the Denier facility.
Right. I've been hearing about that.
There's great funds that have been appropriated, and we'll see if the county votes it in. I mean, that's obviously to the taxpayers' hands at that point, but the access to getting help is, even if it's right in front of you, it's hard. And so I took away with that conversation and everything that I've been reading is like, I mean, if you're seeking that first initial guidance from anybody, if there's so many barriers to entry, the chances of you coming back a second time are greatly lessened. Maybe it's not 50% that you'll return, but it's like if you can go in and get help and it's like barrier, and it's exhausting to get that first like kind of phase. And it's just like, we're just setting these people up to fail. Like we're not helping the situation. So it's like, I don't understand. And I don't agree with the fact that there are so many steps and processes and procedures just to get a little bit of help. I'm not saying go hand out Oxycontin like they're candy pills, but get somebody in front of somebody. Yeah. Like, I mean, they can call you. You know what I'm saying? Not saying they can call you like you're not that, but
well, they do. And we're not social workers. We're not therapists.
But what I'm saying
is we are a listening ear.
They call you and you go like the day of, the night of, you pick up the phone. So it's that simple. It's a direct, it's point A to point B to get a hold of you or you. Right.
And we know, and then we can take the step and say, okay, I know this therapist is maybe easier to get in with than this one. And, or getting to know the youth and saying, we can't definitely direct of who they should go to, but just getting that process started and even doing the transport, like, let me get you there. Because a young person needing, again, the transportation issue, if they have to get on a bus or even ride a bike, it seems like no big deal. Well, if you're struggling with mental health, getting on a bike and getting there, and then maybe it's raining or whatever. So if we can transport and just get you there, that's one barrier that we have helped facilitate that they can step over.
Sure, that's awesome. I think that's the less barriers, the better chance that you're giving somebody to get that help that they need. And I've personally never been to a therapist, and I don't know. I remember the very moment where I've talked about it to nausea, but I won't talk about this specifically. But I remember the very moment where it's like, I knew you have a problem, and something has to happen. And I don't know how it kind of steered itself around, but I was able to somehow crawl out of that like depressive hole. And I don't think that I'm anywhere close to being away from it. I think that it'll probably always be a part of who I am. I think it's just human nature, or at least my human nature. Right.
And weather and barometric pressure and different things that affect that. So put yourself at 17 or 18 and dealing with that and not having support.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm sure, going back to it, like, I mean, I'm 37 now. Absolutely. I would say 100% I probably had problems back in those days. I think I was probably depressed at some level. Yeah. Right. Something was distracting me enough to be like, oh, no, it's this or that, So it's like, I think, yes, that did mold me into kind of the person that I am today. And I think that it does all of us if we can get through it. But it's like, God, if I could have just known to maybe get a little bit of help or talk to somebody about something or hey, something doesn't feel right. It's like, would I have made like gigantic leaps beyond where I'm at today? You know what I'm saying? I think that's,
I wanted to tell you about where we're located, because that, in my opinion, comes into play with all of this. So we are down on Main Street at part of the Hive Collective. And one of the reasons I wanted to be there is, to be able to offer young people not just the drop-in space to hang out, but the Hive does art, there's music, we have an indoor skateboard park, there's an outlet, especially in the colder months when the weather's bad, and it gives young people a place to just be. There's 3 nonprofits there, there's adults there that young people can talk to or not, they can just hang out, but there's a healing to that gives young people an opportunity to build relationship with people that can say, I feel like that sometimes too. So I play music. Hey, let me show you how this keyboard works. And they can go in a room and play guitar, play music, beat on the bongos, whatever. And it's just another opportunity versus let's sit down and talk with a therapist. Let's figure out how we can find outlets that are healing.
The Hive is awesome. I mean, they're such a great program. I told you my brother just like snapped his ankle in half.
Yeah. Yeah. Yay, skateboarding.
Oh yeah, but they're a wonderful program. We actually had Mike Largent was on the podcast early on.
I listened to that. Yeah.
And he, I just thought it was just really cool what he was doing, just to try and get money. And I think that was such an amazing. I don't know. Did that like just come across your plate? Like, oh, they got a spot, or did you try and cultivate that? Or like,
yeah. So this is how we can tie in AmeriCorps with Carmen being in AmeriCorps Vista. So my kids didn't need me anymore, and I was stir crazy, and I decided to become an AmeriCorps member at the age of 40 something.
What is AmeriCorps?
You're gonna explain AmeriCorps?
It's essentially like the Peace Corps version, but for the United States.
Okay.
So a lot of it is what they call like service work, which is essentially you'll just kind of go out to, like, nonprofits will kind of like apply to have AmeriCorps members, and you'll just kind of like be there as like a helping hand, an extra person, like free of charge to them kind of thing. You get like stipended for it. Not very much. So it's like a volunteer. Yeah, it's like,
Right.
yeah.
And the opportunity, I mean, someone that applies, they can go anywhere in the United States and apply.
Right.
So I decided to do it here in town at Florida Mesa Elementary and got to be their Check and Connect member. And I think it was 24 fourth and fifth graders who were all either had been suspended, were behavior problems. They needed that extra support at that school at that time. And all that to say, that was a fantastic experience. But my supervisor was Kelsey Borland, who started the Hive. Yeah. And so I met Kelsey, and I'd known her mother for years. But anyway, I got to meet her, and we had talked about our dreams. And then years down the road, I was working for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and encountered her again and just kept running into her and started talking about what I wanted to do and start this nonprofit. Well, they were just starting the Hive. Her and Jeff and Alex were getting that rolling. And I said, when you get a location, I want to office with you because we all can piggyback on each other. It gives me a drop-in space, and thus the Hive Collective in the Weeds is in that office as well. And they work with the hospitality industry and encouraging sober workspace. And they offer yoga classes that are free to the industry. And they have snowshoes available and paddle boards and a lot of trainings for that industry. So it's just been a really good mix of nonprofits sharing a space and working together.
Yeah, it's a really cool, like, it's just, so many people still don't know about it. It's just, hopefully people here will definitely put it in the show notes. But
and there's concerts there. Yeah. They do a great job with. I think there's one Friday, tomorrow, or this week. Crazy punk and just a little bit of everything. And it's sober space, family friendly, everything from concerts to. I think there was some circus performing classes the other day. I mean, it's just so much going on.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So the youth that you have that are the couple, you said you had a couple that are still in high school or, they would be in high school, right? So 16 to 18 or.
You can be in high school until you're 21 to graduate.
Okay. Wow, okay. So the youth that are in there, you had sent me something, and I do want to talk about it because I want to personally understand more. But at the McKinney-Vento Federal Act, help me understand that because I had it pulled up here and I was kind of going through some of the bullet points. But can you further explain that to me?
This is something Carmen has championed. So I had just learned about it last year, and in the midst of getting this organization started, have been educating myself. And so when she joined us this summer, this is something she's taken on.
It's exactly what you said. It's like a federal assistance act. It was started a really long time ago, I think around the time of like Reagan. And it's switched around quite a bit in terms of like what's been in it and what hasn't. But essentially today what it is it's basically like assistance for youth or young adults to become enrolled in high school. So
Well, and younger age too. I mean, this affects all school
Right,
grades, but
right.
yeah, what we work with.
right. So some things that it provides for a youth, young adult, elementary school student, whoever it may be, are like free enrollment into school regardless of like a parent's signature, regardless of any like needed like enrollment documents. So sometimes they'll need your like birth certificate, and like a youth will be bouncing around from home to home. They won't have that. Let's say they want to go to school the next day. They don't have any of that. They're legally obligated to allow the student to enroll into school. Another thing that it offers is free lunch. Another thing that it offers is free access to any like extracurricular activities or things that would like cost a fee. So like if they wanted to play a sport or join band or things like that. Another really big one is it provides free transportation to and from the school of origin. So let's say like this youth was in Durango, but the school that they came from was Ure or something like that, and they wanted to go back to school in Ure. The school system is obligated to provide transportation for this young person to Ure every day or however it would look like, so that they could go to that school. Yeah, I don't know.
And the districts
What else am I missing?
set up what they're able to offer. Some of them have gift cards for
Right.
everything from Goodwill to Walmart. Montezuma County, their district liaison will meet the youth at Walmart, and they can purchase up to $200 of, necessities and snow boots, whatever is needed at the time. Our school district has the gift cards. Transportation, they make sure they have obviously are able to ride the bus. Maybe they've lost their school ID. Well, it's just a little bit easier process. So the goal is to again take down barriers and make it so that a young person can attend school and simplify it as much as possible. There are even each school district, it's supposed to be pretty cut and dry, but each school district kind of adds and takes away to their liking. But there's some writing in there related to, so for example, I have a young person that has moved into Durango's district from somewhere else. Well, they're behind in school. They've moved enough times. Well, they have not been identified as having needs because of their educational neglect. They're behind in school. They're a senior in high school, just turning 18, having a really hard time keeping up. Well, a school counselor or advisor can work with the principal and figure out how to get this young person graduated. Well, this young person works. Well, we can give them a math credit versus they're really struggling in the math class they're in. How can we make this look the way it needs to get them a math credit? Whereas you would have to normally have an individual education plan, an IEP, to get those accommodations. So it just recognizes a young person has struggles and tries to bring them up to an equal playing field with other students that don't have these barriers.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. I mean, imagine like, like a youth coming to you being like, I want to go to school, like that's not really something we think about, right? We think about like kids not liking school, right? But for like a youth that's homeless, unaccompanied, like a school can be a really safe place, right? It's a place to get a meal usually. It's a place to stay dry, things like that. So this act is just really, really important because, right, it alleviates all those barriers and allows a youth to feel, I don't know, like they took a step in the right direction, I guess.
And the success, I mean, again, thinking about our own life experience or young people that we know that were our friends. I mean, we all need those pats on the back and just feeling good. You've got the extreme of, I don't want to go to school to, young person who's working really hard because this is the only accolades they get, or it fulfills them, or they want to go to college, or whatever that can look like. But Carmen's ability to just step in from the beginning when she started and educate herself and educate me, and we sat down with school districts, and she contacted school districts, and the reality is quite a few school districts in Southwest Colorado just weren't really implementing what needed to happen for lack of training, or, they've got so much on their plate. And so our goal is to work with school districts and pursue young people that potentially are struggling with housing insecurity, so that we can help the school district identify who those young people are. The numbers went up quite a bit already in La Plata County just from the work that Carmen's done in helping. And that's just that, really 14 to 18-year-old age group.
Right.
And we have a AmeriCorps member in Montezuma County now that's starting that work as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, because schools have to budget for this. And then charter schools, Animas High School and Mountain, charter schools have their own district liaison through the Colorado Charter Institute, I believe it's called. So it's us working together with them to help them do their job as best they can, and for us to be able to identify young people.
Are you guys in the schools, like on a regular basis, like just kind of having or trying to build a presence within that sort of, youth demographic?
I think that's definitely in the future. Like we're starting up a street outreach program, trying to pick a better name for it.
Because it's literally meeting them where they are, whether that's at school or out.
And as of right now, I think we're thinking about the Durango Public Library, and then I think the public library down in Cortez as well, as like just a space for youth, young adults to come in and get the things they need. So it could be like a safe sex kit, it could be like hygiene supplies, could be like a first aid kit.
Dry socks,
whatever it is.
Even gift cards that we can offer.
With the potential of like going into schools, kind of thing.
It's a little bit different now. So when I worked for Big Brothers Big Sisters, I had a caseload, and I worked with high schoolers that were the high school bigs for the littles. And so I had a presence. Having a presence now looks very different in schools. They'll call students out of class if necessary, but I don't get to wander the hallways like I used to.
Sure.
But being around lunchtime, after school, you start to get to know young people. But what Carmen is initiating with the street outreach, it gives not only an opportunity to give those supplies, if you will, but start conversations and relationship building.
Sure. And
a young person can say, well, actually, I don't have a place to stay, or actually, whatever the case may be, and opening that door to, okay, well, how can we help, or how can we find help for you?
Right.
Yeah, going back to the brick and mortar. Like the more you're out there, it builds legitimacy, and I can imagine, I could easily see, yes, somebody may come to you directly for their needs, but it could also be a potential conversation of going like, hey, I'm worried about my friend.
Without a doubt.
They're scared of coming forward, or but something is happening, right? And it's like it's kind of like, I had a gentleman on a while ago, and he's the head of the Southwest Drug Task Force. He's got tattoos. He's kind of that guy, and people are more comfortable with him. He doesn't necessarily look like a cop. He doesn't look like a lieutenant. He's they're just kind of more relaxed around him in a sense. So it's like I feel that getting out there, that's awesome. I think that's going to give, yes, legitimacy, but I think it'll give people the ability to kind of open up. Could be gradual.
Right. Especially in I think neutral spaces are really important for anybody, especially when you're going to grab things like that, which can be awkward and kind of embarrassing at times, right? And so yeah, just kind of having it in a space like that's neutral, like a library or something, where you're just like, you wouldn't really expect to see that kind of thing. But you see it and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll just grab that. Nobody's really looking at me. Okay, I'll leave now.
Right.
So.
And it gives us opportunities for that data collection so we can prove to the state there is a need in rural Colorado.
Yeah.
And I think that's known, but being able to give those numbers, I don't know the date. I think it's in the next week or two, we have the point in time count, which is a federal count of homelessness. And we're responsible for making sure our numbers are in and meeting youth where they are and finding out, where did you stay last night, and getting that solid count. It's different with young people because they're more likely to be staying on someone's couch or in a place that they think is safe. So it's, again, that conversation of maybe I can't go out and see they're in a tent, but we know where young people congregate. So I'll be at the rec center that morning just looking around and talking to young people and seeing, where did you sleep last night?
Yeah. So are you guys, is it just you two that are running the outside of the board?
Yeah, so I started it initially, and then with the help of the Rural Collaborative, was able to get an AmeriCorps member. And you started in July, August? In June. And Carmen moved here from outside of Colorado, and then applied for another one. And there was a young lady I knew that had volunteered with us and volunteered at the Hive. And I said, I want you to be in Montezuma County, because she was moving to Cortez. And so had the opportunity for her to start in December and do similar work to what Carmen's doing and getting that, the relationship built. We work with Southwest Open Schools and SWOs is what they call it. And just trying to meet some needs there. She will be starting at the library, I think, in a couple of weeks, getting that street outreach going. But as far as SWOs, we were able to meet with school counselors and the principal, and we're going to hopefully be writing some grants together and work with their needs, as well as how we can help Montezuma County and with the Good Samaritan outreach there for their food bank. But at SWOs, we just in conversation realized there was a need for shoes. Sometimes young people don't have the opportunity for new shoes, and they walk a lot and they're growing. And we were able to get together some gift certificates for to buy each young person up to $50 of a pair of shoes.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
that was super cool. We were excited about that. I mean, it might seem silly, but it's a need.
Yeah.
And if a young person their feet can be dry while they're walking to wherever they need to, and it gives them that a little bit of confidence. And
that kid's going to remember that for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Or her life.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't
Yeah.
say his, but yeah, they'll remember that forever.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to see where this thing goes for you guys. And I think it's definitely a bit of a selfless act that you guys are giving back to these youth, and you're just trying to do right by them. And I think it's just so encouraging to see that people are out there are really just trying to make sure that, people have someone in their corner, because we don't always, and so I think that it's really amazing what you guys are trying to do and build upon. And I'm really I want to see where this thing goes in the next 3 to 5 years, and maybe you have some gigantic facility and you can really have a place, of scale and magnitude. And
well, my dream is to have an emergency shelter and have that, there's shelters around. Well, obviously under 18 can't stay there by themselves, and your average 18 to 24-year-old is not going to go stay at a shelter. And so that's an emergency need, in my opinion. And then big goal is to have transitional housing, whether that be some fourplexes or an apartment project where a young person can, apply and go through that process.
Sure.
But it gives them the opportunity to get their own rental and get started that way.
I mean, we all know I'm sure moving here recently, you understand all too well our rental market, our housing market. You know, it's maybe less than other areas in Colorado, but it still seems astronomical. But I think that we're going to have a little bit of correction here, and there are more builders kind of getting, you know, whether their hands are being forced from the county level or city level, but they're more open to deed restricted, you know, and, you know, you hear that term sometimes and people are like, oh my God, deed restriction. I'm like, hold on. It's got such a negative connotation around it. But I do think that people are starting to kind of, that it's a slow, you know, it's like the wheel is gigantic and it's slowly starting to move.
Right.
But as the conversations continue, and I've sat, you know, this board that I sit on with the city of Bayfield, or the town of Bayfield, you know, that conversation is happening more and more. It's like, look, it is a problem. We need affordable housing or attainable housing, as we're calling it anymore. But transitional housing is such a huge thing. So I'm glad to hear that that's a goal. It's a hard goal, and I get it. But
It is.
I think with the contacts that, you know, you have in the real estate community, myself and obviously Jerome, you know, as that conversation continues, it's like,
Right.
you know, hey, there's a need, you know, how can we facilitate this? Let's help out. Let's all come together as a community. You know, it shouldn't just be one person or the other. We have a problem that needs resolution, and it's like, how can we come together? So,
And talking about the mental health aspect, which we've breached several times, but understanding that if a young person is not housed and is not getting their needs met, your community is going to be impacted by shoplifting, by petty crime, by drug use or substance use. And if the trajectory can change and we can come alongside and have that supportive organization or that one caring adult, or more people understand, it can be that simple of just coming alongside a young person saying, how can I help? Or maybe you do notice someone that might be flying a sign and they're a young person and maybe they do need a cheeseburger. I don't know. But how can we teach them to fish? How can we not just give them the fish?
Yeah.
And so wanting to do that for young people and the impact it can have on a healthy community.
yeah, no, I mean, it's God, it's so much bigger than us three in this room right now. And that's
And
the
it's
thing
overwhelming. There's many times I don't sleep a lot, and and my mind just won't stop sometimes. And I have a lot of energy, which is good. And then I have to stop and breathe and go, okay, I just got today.
Yeah.
Yes, I can have long-term plans, but I've got these young people, and this one, you know, the holidays were an extreme stressor for a lot of young people. So how can I focus on my mental health and our mental health so that we are able to?
That's what I was going to ask you. I was like, you have to work on yourself as well.
Yeah.
You know, you can give and give and give, and it's like you've only got so much in the colander, right?
Yeah.
It's eventually, you know. So make
I've
sure
got
you're looking
I've
out
got to
for
give
yourselves.
a plug though. Have you heard of Float 360? Salt Float 360?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Did you go?
It's not weekly, several times a month.
Yeah.
No, it is the only time in my life where I am completely just calm and my brain is almost blank.
Yeah.
It is the most beautiful experience. And a good hike or skiing or, you know, those things are all helpful, but my brain tends to spin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get you.
It's fantastic.
You saw me trying to get to the seat. That was a work in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's like, so that is, so I know that it's a salt float and it's, so the buoyancy is different, but is it the tube that it's in? Is that like an anechoic chamber? Like, does it reverberate sound?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And it's decent size. I mean,
Okay.
I don't feel claustrophobic at all.
Gotcha.
But it is, you know, it's dark and you can have a little light, you know, a crack and have it. But the Epsom salt that you're floating in okay, I'm not going to do a service here because I'm going to get this wrong. I don't know, but there's something healing about not just the calmness and the relaxation, but then the salt that you're floating in has healing properties.
Sure.
And I feel like $1,000,000.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to book for tomorrow.
I do want to try it out. I'm a big
I'm gonna
advocate
run out
for-
of appointments because I'm gonna tell everybody about it. But get your membership.
Yeah. Where are they at in town?
She is across the street from Durango Outdoor Exchange and that strip center.
North side of town. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to check it out. I'm a huge advocate for, like a sauna and then also like cold plunge. Cold plunge really sucks.
Oh, I would never
yeah.
do that.
But
She does
it's-
have the sauna available as
Yeah,
well.
I was at the
you do
Ignacio one last
Plunge?
night.
Oh,
It was somebody. I feel like they turned it was 185, which to an avid like sauna person, they're probably hearing this, be like, "Pff, whatever, dude, 185. But I was able to get 30 minutes, and I walked out of there just like way better. My head was right, and then I went and took a cold shower, and it was horrific.
Oh, of
But
course.
I just felt alive.
right.
Conquer the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully somebody hears this and gets something out of this. We will absolutely put all of your contact information in all the show notes that we possibly can, and try and just get people, aware of your organization, because I do think that it's doing some absolute good in the community. The Herald article was great. And I just want people to start talking about it. It's just
Yeah.
like if the conversation can build,
Right.
and then maybe people would come and volunteer if there's any way that they can, and just get it out there. Because I do think that tackling so many problems we talked about tonight start at the youth level.
Right.
We have an event that we're working on that we hope to have before the snow melts. And it's just a sleep out event, and it'll be a fundraiser, but bringing awareness to what it's like to sleep outside and, really just have a few things that you can bring
Sure.
with you. And so that's in the works. No set date yet, but
That'll be good.
hopefully that could bring conversation and
I think it would be a great
little
conversation
fundraising.
piece. Be like, see how bad this really stinks?
it's, how many of you are going to bail?
It's cold. You can't have hot cocoa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there will be no hot cocoa.
You're so mean.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate you. And I hope this does some good.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the invitation.
Have you ever felt
Are you listening? Damn.